All right, y'all. So we had a power outage last week. We kept power with the generator, but a lot of people couldn't make their milk pickups because of the roads being complete crud because of the snow. So I have a lot of extra milk that we're going to turn into cheese today and various other dairy products because I don't sell my milk if it's more than a day old. So we're going to get some of this milk inside and start making some dairy products. So I have 5.5 gallons of milk. Today we are going to do some butter, we're going to make some mozzarella cheese, and we're going to make some Colby cheese. So with all of these recipes, you'll be able to do with store-bought milk as well. This, of course, is the raw milk from our jerseys. But the only thing is, if you're going to make butter, you're going to need whipping cream. You're not going to need whole milk from the store. So just keep that in mind. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to skim off some of the cream off of all of these. That way we can start making our butter. All right, and to separate off the cream, it's pretty easy. With raw milk, cream floats to the top. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. If not, I'll insert a clip of a close-up. But the cream will separate to the top. If you have a cream separator, it makes it a lot easier. I do have a cream separator. I just figured not many people do. So we're just going to do it the old-fashioned way of just taking a cup and skimming it off. It's okay if you get some of the milk in there. It's just going to take a little bit longer for your butter to whip up. So we're going to go ahead and switch over to voiceover mode just because the audio was really bad. My dishwasher was steaming, which was for some reason messing up my mic, and the boy was doing laundry, so you could hear the washer and dryer in the background. So we're just gonna roll with what we got. We're gonna do voiceover. So I'm talking with my hands here a lot, and that's because I've got my cream in here. And when you're making butter, you don't want to fill your container up more than halfway because it is going to expand and it is going to whip up and turn into whipped cream before it breaks into butter. So never fill your container up halfway, whether you're using a KitchenAid, a Bosch, a hand mixer, or even a mason jar. But I like to whip mine with the whisk attachment until it starts to break. And then I move over to the dough hook just to kind of collect all that butter up. And like I said, look here, it's whipped up, and right now it's actually starting to separate. It's like over whipped cream right now. It's not quite butter. We're not right there yet, but I am going to go ahead and switch over to my dough hook just to get it to that final point of where it's going to break and turn into butter. And then once it finally does hit that butter stage, I'm going to put a fine mesh screen into a bowl because I want to collect all of that buttermilk because it makes great biscuits. So I'm just going to pour in my butter and my buttermilk into this mesh screen to make sure I catch all of the buttermilk that I want. And then I'm just scraping the sides because it kind of got stuck. And then I'm going to make sure I get all of that buttermilk out as much as I can. I'm going to press this into the sieve, and then once I feel like I've gotten as much as I can out of it, I'm going to set that buttermilk aside so I don't get any water in it because we're going to rinse this butter next. And then I'm going to keep that bowl underneath everything while I'm working because I'm going to run this under cold water as I squeeze out all of that excess buttermilk out of the butter. I'm doing this with cold water, and then I'll run it through the strainer again. And I'm going to continue to do this until I get as much of that buttermilk out as I can. The more buttermilk you can get out of your butter, the longer it will actually last in your refrigerator. So try to get as much of it out as possible. And then once I have rinsed it all out, I'm going to actually put it in these silicone molds I got off of Amazon. I'll link them down below. That they're actually made for butter. And I just like sticking them into this mold, and then I'll pop them in the freezer for a couple hours. And then that way they're easy to pop out of the mold, and I can just either keep it in the fridge for what I'm going to use, and I freeze all of the rest. Alright, so while the butter is being made, we're going to go ahead and start on our mozzarella because the milk is going to have to heat up. For the mozzarella, you're going to need milk. You can use raw milk, or you can use store-bought whole milk as long as it says it is not ultra-pasteurized. You do not want ultra-pasteurized, but any whole milk from the store will work for this recipe. You're also going to need some citric acid. You can get this in the canning area of your store or over by the baking area. You're also going to need some rennet, and then optional, some lipase, and you'll also need some salt. So let's get started on the mozzarella. So for this recipe, I'm using the milk that I had skimmed some of the cream off of. It still has cream in it, but just not as much as it normally would. Now I am actually diluting my citric acid and my lipase into about a cup of water, and I'm using the recipe off of cheesemaking.com. They don't have lipase in their recipe. I like to add it though. And once I've got that added in, I'm just going to stir this and heat this up very slowly. We want to get this to 90 degrees Fahrenheit before we move on to the next step. Once we hit temperature, I actually went a little bit over, but it's perfectly fine. As long as you're between that 90 and 100 degrees, you're pretty good. After we get that to the temp, I'm going to remove this off of the heat, and we're going to get ready to add in our rennet. Now, when I add in my rennet, I'm going to stir this for about 30 seconds to 45 seconds. You don't want to stir it too much because you don't want that rennet to start setting up and not working correctly. After that, I am going to put my lid on my pot, and I'm going to just let this sit for about 5 minutes. I'm going to set a timer and just leave it for that rennet to do its thing. So after 5 minutes, I'm going to check to see if we have a clean break, which we do. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting my curds. If you don't have a clean break, that's perfectly fine. Just let it sit for a few more minutes and come back and check it. So with the mozzarella, I'm actually going to cut them into 1-inch pieces. It doesn't have to be precise. I'm just using a knife and cutting them into 1-inch pieces. And then after I've cut them, I'm going to let them rest for about 5 minutes. That way those curds can heal and they're not going to lose so much of their butter fat. So now we are going to cook our curds a little bit. I'm using my thermometer just to cut up those bigger curds that I missed at the bottom. And we're going to want to heat this up to about 105 degrees. And you're going to do this slowly. You don't want to rush this process. Just put your heat on about medium and just continue to stir until you reach 105 degrees. Once you hit 105 degrees, remove it to the heat, and we're going to get ready to strain our curds out so we can get to the stretching process. Now for me, I prefer to just have a bowl with a strainer in it inside my sink. It just makes the process a little bit easier because I'm going to try to save as much of that whey as I can. I like using the whey to actually stretch the mozzarella, and the whey can be used later for another cheese that we're going to be making. And then once I have all of my curd out of my big pot, I'm going to go ahead and salt it. I use about 1 teaspoon per gallon of milk. If you like it a little bit more salty, add a little bit more. But at this point, I'm going to add my salt. I'm going to try to move the curds around gently to get a little bit more of that whey out as well. Now, because I'm doing such a big batch, I actually have 2 bowls in front of me. I've got a pot of hot water that I've heated up to about 150 degrees. It is pretty hot, so if you don't have asbestos hands like I do, wear gloves to protect your hands because this is hot. But you're going to essentially want to heat up that cheese so you can start stretching it. And then as I'm working, I'll add that pot into the little glass bowl I have so I can stretch it while I'm heating the water back up for my next batch. And I'm going to continue to do this until I've gone through all of the cheese. And then as the cheese heats up, you're going to just stretch it and then bring it back together and then stretch it. You want to continue to stretch that cheese in one direction until you're happy with the consistency and the pull on it. If you find it's getting hard to pull or it's breaking mid-pull, go ahead and reheat up your water and your whey and reheat your cheese up and continue to stretch it that way. Once you're happy with the pull of your cheese, you can roll it into a ball, and then I put mine in a saltwater brine that's nice and cold. I add a little bit of ice just to set the cheese, and it's ready to eat. Now, while I was heating up my mozzarella, I was actually heating up my milk for my Colby as well. For the Colby cheese, you're going to need about 2 gallons of whole milk. As long as it's not ultra pasteurized, it can be store-bought or raw milk. You're going to need some mesophilic culture. If you're using store-bought, you're going to want some calcium chloride. You're also going to need some rennet. And optional, you'll want some annatto. I don't use it in my Colby. And you also, of course, need some salt for your brine. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to heat your milk up to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, and once you hit that temperature, you're going to add in your mesophilic culture. Again, I'm using the recipe off of cheesemaking.com, so if you want to use that recipe, I will link it down below. But I'm going to add in my culture, and I'm going to let it sit for a few minutes until it can rehydrate, and then we're going to stir it in. Once it's nice and incorporated, we're going to go ahead and put the lid on our pot, and we are going to just let this sit for about an hour undisturbed so it can acidify our milk so we can move on to the next step. Then after about an hour, I'm just checking to make sure we didn't drop in temp too much. We're still sitting at about 86, 87 degrees, so that is perfect. So now we are going to go ahead and add in our rennet. I dilute my rennet in about a quarter cup of cold water, and I'm just going to stir this in for about 45 seconds. You do not want to stir this too much. About 30 to 45 seconds is perfect, and then we're going to again put the lid on it, leave it alone, and let it set for about 45 minutes. After 45 minutes, we're going to check to see if we have a clean break, and if we do, we're going to cut our curds into 1/2 inch squares. Again, you don't have to be precise, just around a 1/2 inch will work perfectly fine. And after you've cut all of your curds into those 1/2 inch squares, we're going to let that rest again for 5 minutes, just like in the mozzarella. And then I had to let mine rest a little bit longer because I lost track of time because I'm doing a lot of cheeses today. But after a few minutes, you're going to come in and you're going to start stirring your curds, and we're going to heat this up very slowly to 102 degrees. You're going to want to do this over about medium heat, and it should take anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes for you to get it up to that 102 degree mark. 102 degrees Fahrenheit, I should add. After you've reached your target temp of 102 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to continue to stir this for about 15 to 20 minutes until your curds become a little bit more hard. You don't want your curds to be too soft for this. Once your curds are a little bit firmer, you can go ahead and just let this set, and you're going to let all those curds settle down to the bottom because we're going to drain off a lot of this excess whey. And to do this, I find just using a measuring cup and scooping out all the excess whey is probably the easiest way to do it, because we're going to want to reserve all of that whey so again we can use it to make yet another cheese. But we're going to get as much of this whey out as possible so we can start kind of washing our curds. Once you've got all that excess whey out, you're going to start adding some cooler water in. I add about 75 degree Fahrenheit water, and we're going to add this in until we can bring the temperature of those curds down to about 85 degrees, and we're going to mix this and stir it for a few minutes at that temp. We're going to stir those curds for a few more minutes, and then we're going to add even more water, this time around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're going to add enough water to bring those curds down to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And once you reach that 75 degrees, you're going to want to stir this for another 15 to 20 minutes. I know it's a lot of stirring. Cheese is just a lot of waiting and a lot of stirring. And then after that, we are finally ready to start getting ready to press our cheese. I have got a colander with some cheesecloth in it to catch all of my curds, and we're just going to drain all of this out to make sure we get all of that water and what little bit of whey we have left in there out. And then after that, I am going to transfer it over into my cheese press. There's a ton of different cheese presses out there. I have one that I got from cheesemaking.com, and this is actually the large mold and follower that I'm using for this particular cheese. So I'm just going to add that in. I'm going to pull on my cheesecloth to make sure I don't have any wrinkles in it. Once my cheese is all nestled into my cheese mold, I'm going to go ahead and put it in my press. And for this Colby cheese, we're actually going to press it at about 10 pounds for 15 minutes. And then we're going to move to 20 pounds for 30 minutes, and then 40 pounds for 90 minutes. And then overnight, we're going to do 50 pounds. And then in between that, every couple of hours, I'm actually going to take it out and flip it. And now it is the next day. It is time to remove my cheese from the cheese press. So I'm going to pull that out, and I already have a brine ready to go. So I'm not going to make another brine, but for this cheese, you're going to want to brine this. And for that, you're just going to need about a gallon of water, 2 pounds of salt, and then you can add in some calcium chloride, which will help prevent your cheese from getting slimy, as well as about a teaspoon of white vinegar. Now, because this cheese obviously is going to float because it is salt water, I do like to add just a little bit of salt on the top of the cheese. And we're going to brine this for about 8 hours, and I flip mine at about the halfway mark. And now that that is done, we're going to go ahead and switch back to the previous day, where I am also going to be making some sour cream. We have Taco Tuesday this week. I don't have sour cream. The store is 30 minutes away, so we're just going to make our own. And to do that, I'm just going to skim some of the cream off of my milk again, and I'm going to add in about a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half of lemon juice. Now, if you have raw milk, you don't even have to add lemon juice. You can just leave this out on the counter, shake it every so often. In about 24 hours, you should have sour cream. But I am not leaving mine out on the counter. I actually want to put mine in the fridge so I can get a nice thicker sour cream. So I'm going to add in the lemon juice and I'm going to shake it up really well. And then every couple of hours, I'm going to pull it from the fridge, give it a shake, and in about 24 to 36 hours, I will have beautiful, thick sour cream. All right, so we have our butter made. We've got buttermilk from that butter. We also have sour cream in the fridge, souring for tacos for this week. We also finished up our mozzarella. We finished our Colby, which is in the press right now and will be ready to brine tomorrow. And from our Colby, we got one more byproduct, whey. And I have a short on how to do this, but we're going to turn this whey, which is almost 3 gallons, into some more cheese. We're going to make ricotta with this. So let's go. This one's an easy one. All you're going to need is either some vinegar or some lemon juice and your whey. So let's get into it. So all you're going to need to do is set your pot of whey on your stove and over medium high heat. You're going to want to heat this up to about 195 to 200 degrees. Now you're going to want to keep a close eye on it because you do not want this to boil over because it just makes a huge mess. And you'll start to see as we hit that 195 degree mark, it will start to separate more curds from that whey. But at this point, I'm going to add in my lemon juice, or if you want to use white vinegar, that's perfectly fine too. And we're going to stir this for another 1 to 2 minutes, and you're going to see even more curds starting to be released. After a few minutes, you can go ahead and strain this. I have a colander in my sink with some cheesecloth on it, and I'm just going to pour it in. Now, you can save this whey if you want to as well. It's great for making bread and stuff. We usually give it to our pigs, but since we don't have any pigs and I'm running out of space everywhere, I'm just going to let it go down the drain. It's perfectly fine. So I'm going to just drain this all out, and I'm going to let it sit in the sink for about an hour to get all of that whey out of there that I can. After about an hour, I like to tie mine up onto a cabinet, or you can tie it from your microwave somewhere that you can get gravity working for you, just to be able to get all of that excess whey out. And I let mine hang for about 2 hours. The longer you let it hang, the drier ricotta you're going to get, obviously. I like to let mine hang until it really just stops dripping, and then I completely underestimated the amount of ricotta cheese I was going to get from this whey, because this bowl that I chose was just way too small and I made a very large mess. From that 3 gallons of whey that would have normally just been discarded, we ended up with almost 2 pounds of ricotta. Now at this point you can salt it and you can add in anything that you want to add into it. I like to add different herbs and stuff as I am using it because I will usually take about half of it and freeze it for later. And I still underestimate it because even this bowl was just a little bit too small. All right, y'all. I'm down here because my kitchen is small and it's the only angle that will really work. Obviously, it is the next day because we are brining our cheese. It is out of the cheese press, and it'll stay in here for probably another 24 hours, and then I will go ahead and let it dry on the shelf for a few days before I package it and put it in the cheese cave. But from that 5.5 gallons of raw milk, we got 6 pounds of Colby. We got 3 pounds of mozzarella. We also got a pound of butter. And then we have some buttermilk to make some biscuits in the morning for breakfast, as well as some sour cream for tacos tonight.
But wait! There's more!
Editing me here, I'm actually shredding up some mozzarella to put in the freezer, but I completely forgot to add in the ricotta that we had made. It was sitting in the back of the fridge. I didn't see it. I forgot it. So we also got a 1.5 pounds of ricotta, which brings our total for cheeses and butter to 11.5 pounds, which is pretty awesome if you ask me. So that is what I've got for you guys today. If you like this video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up. If you have any questions about cheese or soap or anything, just leave them down in the comments below, and we will see you guys in the next one. Bye.